The year is 2026. Most of the time, that feels like nothing more than a number attached to ordinary life. But history has a strange way of hiding entire nightmares inside a year. And if we are looking for the deadliest year to be alive, the strangest place to begin is the year the sun itself seemed to lose its strength. In 536, people across parts of the world looked up and saw a sky that did not behave like a sky anymore. The sun was still there, but it looked wrong. It gave light without warmth, like the world had been covered by invisible dirty glass. Days arrived, but they did not feel like proper days. The air stayed cold, the fields struggled. People waited for the seasons to correct themselves, and the seasons did not seem interested. A historian named Procopius wrote that the sun shone like the moon for most of that year. That sounds poetic, until you imagine living inside it. You walk outside, look up, and the most reliable thing in human history suddenly looks sick. Today, scientists think a massive volcanic eruption threw material high into the atmosphere, dimming sunlight and disrupting the climate. But nobody standing in a field back then had a clean explanation. To them, the world was simply failing. A farmer could plant the way his father planted, wait for the same warmth, and still receive a year that no longer followed the old rules. And that is the first pattern in the deadliest years. The danger is rarely one thing. A darkened sky becomes a weak harvest. A weak harvest becomes hunger. Hunger makes people fragile, and when bodies are already tired, disease finds them more easily. A few years later, the Justinianic plague swept through parts of the Mediterranean world. So the year of the strange sky may have helped push societies into a weaker, colder, more desperate age. And once you see that pattern, 1348 does not feel like a separate disaster. It feels like the same human nightmare, only this time the sky was not the enemy. This time, the enemy was closeness. By 1348, the Black Death was tearing through Europe with a speed people could barely understand. For the person living through it, it was not a map with arrows on it. It was a sound through the wall. It was a neighbor who looked healthy a few days ago. It was a church bell ringing so often that the sound itself started to feel infected. People did not know about bacteria. They did not understand the hidden path between fleas, rats, trade, and human bodies. Their explanations often pointed toward punishment, poisoned air, or forces far beyond human control. That made the fear deeper, because a disaster you cannot explain becomes almost impossible to argue with. You cannot make a clever plan against something you cannot see. A person you loved could become the person you were afraid to touch, and that is one of the cruelest things disease can do. It turns love into a risk calculation. The Black Death killed a massive share of Europe's population. The exact numbers are debated because the records are broken, but the emotional reality is not hard to understand. When death visits nearly every street, people stop thinking of it as an event and start feeling it as weather. And then, almost 2 centuries later, another deadly year appeared on the other side of the world. In 1520, smallpox struck the Aztec Empire during the Spanish conquest of Mexico. This was disease arriving in a population with no previous exposure to it. The human immune system is partly a memory machine. It survives by recognizing old enemies, but smallpox was new to the people it struck, and that made it brutally unfair. Imagine being strong, careful, respected, and still completely unprepared because your body has never been introduced to the thing trying to kill you. Smallpox spread through Tenochtitlan at one of the worst possible moments. The Aztec world was already under military and political pressure. Then disease began removing people from the story faster than society could adjust. It killed ordinary people, but it also struck leaders and warriors, damaging the ability to organize, respond, and resist. That is why 1520 matters here. It shows that the deadliest year is not always the one with the biggest battlefield or the loudest explosion. Sometimes biology quietly changes the outcome of history. A virus helped weaken an empire at the exact moment another empire was trying to break it. Then the calendar moves forward to 1816, and at first, the danger sounds almost gentle compared with plague and conquest. People called it the year without a summer. That phrase almost sounds like the title of a sad poem, but for the people who lived through it, it meant food becoming uncertain. The cause began a year earlier, when Mount Tambora erupted in 1815. It was one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in recorded history, and it threw material into the atmosphere that disrupted weather patterns far away from the mountain itself. In 1816, Parts of Europe and North America saw frost in months when crops should have been growing. Fields failed. Food prices rose. Poor families were pushed from worry into desperation. And this is where the story gets uncomfortable, because food is supposed to be boring. A person can stand in a kitchen, be annoyed that they do not know what to eat, and not realize they are standing inside a miracle. In 1816, that miracle cracked. A farmer could do his work correctly and still lose, because a mountain exploded on the other side of the world, and the sky carried the consequences into his field. Your life can be ruined by something you never saw, in a place you never knew mattered. Then comes 1918, a year that feels modern enough to make the horror sharper. By then, the world had trains, newspapers, factories, hospitals, and governments that could move information and people across huge distances. Human civilization had become more connected, more organized, and more powerful. And that power became part of the problem. The First World War had already pushed millions of people to the edge. Armies lived in crowded conditions. Families at home were strained by years of uncertainty. Then the 1918 outbreak moved through a world already carrying troops, workers, and news at industrial speed. The Spanish flu did not feel like an ancient curse. It felt like modern life turning against itself. A soldier could make it through the front, only to lose his strength far behind the lines. A nurse could spend the day caring for others and go home without knowing what she was carrying. A family could think the conflict was far away, then realize the larger crisis had reached their own street. What made 1918 so disturbing was the overlap. People had already learned to fear what machines and governments could do. Then the outbreak reminded them that even ordinary life could become fragile almost overnight, and it reached many young adults, people who were expected to be strong enough to handle ordinary illness. When the people everyone expects to endure begin disappearing from daily life, hope loses its shape. By the 1940s, human beings had entered an age where disaster could be organized on a scale that earlier centuries could barely imagine. In 1942, World War II reached one of its darkest points. This was not the sun dimming because of ash. This was not an outbreak moving blindly through communities. This was human planning, human belief, and human machinery turning entire populations into categories on paper. There is a different kind of fear in a disaster made by people. A volcano does not care who you are. An outbreak does not know your name. But in 1942, millions of people lived inside systems where ordinary lives could be sorted, moved, recorded, and controlled by other human beings. That kind of danger feels colder because it proves that the ordinary world can be redesigned into a machine. And then 1943 shows how war can kill even when the battlefield is not right in front of you. In Bengal, famine became one of the great tragedies of the war years. Millions died, and the causes were tangled together. Crop problems, wartime pressure, inflation, colonial policy, panic, and failures of distribution. But for someone living through it, the causes were not an academic debate. They were an empty bowl. Famine is one of the cruelest disasters because it makes time feel violent. It can arrive as a smaller meal, then a weaker body, then a longer walk for food, then the awful realization that help is moving too slowly or not moving towards you at all. And the Bengal famine was not simply nature being cruel. It was also shaped by decisions, priorities, and power. Food existed in the world, but the people who needed it most could not reach it in time. That may be the final pattern in all of this. The deadliest years are not always the years when one terrible thing happens. They are the years when the systems people depend on begin failing together. So what was the deadliest year to be alive? Maybe the honest answer depends on where you were standing. If you were in the wrong place in 536, you might have watched the sun weaken and wondered if the world was ending slowly. In 1348, you might have learned that the person you loved could also be the person you feared touching. In 1520, your immune system might have been thrown into a war it had no memory of fighting. In 1816, your field might have failed because of a mountain beyond your imagination. In 1918, you might have survived war only to meet a fever. In 1942, you might have lived under a machine of violence built by human hands. In 1943, you might have learned that hunger can be caused not only by nature, but by the way humans choose who gets protected.